The Nintendo Switch is one of the most successful gaming consoles of all time. Its success was based on it being a home console and a portable in one. No other console has ever done nor attempted such a thing before. In previous years, we had both consoles and portables living together in harmony, but when Nintendo was concepting their next console after the Wii U, they decided on the idea to combine both types of gaming into one for their new console. This was genius because in the handheld and home console department, Nintendo always held their own perfectly. So when the Switch came out, it of course was a smashing success for what it had to offer. Playing Nintendo's new lineup of games on this thing is a whole lot of fun, with tons of many memorable experiences for this next generation of Nintendo. But not only can you play Nintendo's new games on here, you also got the library of third-party games on the Switch here as well. Well, whenever they work, that is. Here's the present, please, Sonic! The Switch and its third-party lineup is definitely a rocky one, to say the least. With every great port a game gets to the Switch, there's usually a horrendous one right around the corner. Why do you look like that? With that said, though, there have been some games released on the Switch that'll honestly make you forget that you were playing the Switch version entirely, until you look down and realize you're holding a Nintendo Switch controller and not a PS5 one. But when it comes to Nintendo's in-house main lineup of games, they look and run fantastic on the Nintendo Switch. I mean, just to name a few. These games always have a ton of love and care put into them when being released. From the beautiful visuals of Super Mario Odyssey, to the amazing fighting shenanigans from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, to even the amazing open world journey that is Breath of the Wild. But the third-party games here, on the other hand, are a different story. This is mainly where the problems in the Nintendo Switch comes up when it comes to its third-party lineup of games. Whether it's the games looking very ugly or extremely choppy in comparison to its main console counterpart, or being downgraded visually to the point where the models look like wax. The frame rate rarely being stable half the time, the whole galore. While I understand the complaints for this, trust me, I do, but at the same time, the companies tried their best for these ports. Well, some did. But in the end, when it comes to Switch ports of games, it's honestly just 50-50 if it's either going to be a broken, horrendous mess, or actually really good. And while normally some would spend most of their time talking about the worst Nintendo Switch ports to ever exist, today I'm going to be the positive light in the room and tell you from my experience the Switch games that I think are perfect on this console. And the way I'm going to be doing this today is structuring the 9 games I've selected in the following order. First batch are ones I think are good but still have some problems, to games I think are really darn good on here, and then ones I'd highly recommend you pick up for the Nintendo Switch. So we'll give each of these 3 sections a title. The third rank being titled Give It a Try, second being Pick It Up, and then the first being Totally Worth It. Keep in mind, these games are ones I have and have played, so apologies if I missed the game you personally have for the Switch you enjoy. Also, with what I give today, there will be no game collections here of games from previous generations, because those are older games and should obviously run well on the Switch. That is a given. And also, I have a lot of game collections for the Switch, and we'd be here all day if I was to bring those in. So with that stated, let us get started with the third rank of what's good but still lacks a bit, aka the Give It a Try rank. Back in 2017, when Crash Bandicoot made his re-debut with the Insane Trilogy after the last console Crash game being Mind Over Mutant in 2008, but the last Crash game ever to come out was an iOS game being Nitro Kart 2. The Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy launched June 30th, 2017 for PS4 and Xbox One. This collection not only featured remakes of the 3 classic games made on the PlayStation back in the 90s, but also gave Crash a new HD slight redesign for the next generation of gaming. It's not anything too drastic of a change, but in the next entry being Crash 4, they'd perfect the new redesign for the next generation and would make it look fantastic. This remake trilogy was a great package that really brought Crash back into a new positive light after the flops of games they launched throughout the 2000s. This collection managed to make Crash Bandicoot relevant again after all these years, and a year later the Insane Trilogy would end up coming to the Nintendo Switch and Steam as well. While out of both of these two, the Steam version is obviously the better one with the better frame rate, but how does the Switch version hold up to, well, let's say the PS4 version? The Nintendo Switch version of the Crash Insane Trilogy really does hold its own compared to the other console versions. But how did I survive that? This game doesn't really look that downgraded, nor does it have any issues running on this console. Put a side by side of the two, you genuinely probably wouldn't be able to tell at first glance. Now, while yes, the PS4 version is more steady, and the Switch version will have a frame drop or two every now and again, but overall, it's not a bad port, and it's definitely one of those games where you could honestly play it and hardly tell a difference really. Again, every now and again, there will be some frame drops in this port, but hey, this was made for the next gen consoles of the time, so it's understandable. And seeing how this port was treated, it gives me hope for the other Crash games ported to the Switch, and maybe I'll pick them up sometime as well. But overall, if you're wanting to play Crash Insane Trilogy on the go, then this Switch port, I'd have to give it the Give It a Try stamp. It's definitely one I'd recommend. Let's move on. Now, looking past the fact of how I feel about this game, Sonic Superstars on the Switch is surprisingly good. I definitely wasn't expecting this game to do as good as it does on the Nintendo Switch, considering Sonic's previous lineup of games on the Switch beforehand. But when I got my hands on this Switch port long after I've said how I feel about this game, I was kind of shocked about how this game looks and actually runs well on the Switch. Dare I say, I was actually impressed with it. I never thought I'd see myself talking about Superstars in a positive light ever, but here we are, and this is the only time you'll catch me doing so because this game still sucks, sorry. First off, starting with how this game runs on the Switch, Sonic Superstars runs at a nice decent 60 frames per second, something no new Sonic title has done on this console before besides Sonic Origins with the classic titles and another game we'll get back to later. But back to Superstars, while playing this, there were times when I would be playing this game on the Switch, and honestly, I legit kid you not, when first playing this, I actually forgot I was playing the Switch version. No joke. When I realized I was playing the Switch version and not my PS5 copy, I was actually shocked at how I was fooled. Now, while this game does run well on the Switch, there are a few cutbacks to this game compared to the main console version. Now, of course, that's expected for a Switch version of a game. Most versions of Switch games always have some kind of downgrade in them visually, and that's no different here for Sonic Superstars. And one of the most popular critiques I see online for the Switch version of this game is that it looks like a game released on the 3DS, and honestly, I can totally see it. While that's not entirely a bad thing, once you start to look at it, you do start to see the differences between, say, the PS5 version and the Nintendo Switch version. But the game still does a decent job here on the Switch for what it manages to do at the end of the day. Personally, I don't know if I see myself playing the Switch port too much, mainly because I hardly even touch my PS5 copy at all. But if you love Sonic Superstars and really want to play it on the go, then this is a good port to play of it. I'd definitely give it a try. You'd be playing what is honestly one of the best Sonic Switch ports we have for the Sonic series. When it comes to third-party open-world games on the Switch, most of the time they don't normally end up looking or playing too great on this thing. And in 2021, I thought the same thing was going to apply when Nintendo announced in a Nintendo Direct that Dragon Ball Z Kakarot was getting ported to the Nintendo Switch. Now, when this game came out in January of 2020, this game already looked and ran really good on the PS4 back then. And seeing now that it was getting its own Switch port, me and my friend who also loved this game as much as I did when it came out, we both was expecting this game to run like absolute trash on the Switch and lag like there was no tomorrow and just look flat out ugly. So I didn't bother giving this game a chance on the Switch at all. This game would just be the game I had for PS4, nothing else, and I knew some point this game would get a PS5 upgrade boost. At some point, for sure. But recently, one night I was browsing the Nintendo eShop demo section and saw that Dragon Ball Z Kakarot had its demo also available on the Nintendo Switch. So I thought, hey, why not give it a download and maybe try it out? Now, I feel like it's crucial I mention this. I was playing on handheld mode, so I wasn't expecting anything from this demo at all. But when I booted up the demo and got to the title screen, I was actually pretty intrigued at how smooth everything was at first, from the intro to the title screen. So I started up the main demo, and when playing the demo, long story short, I was shocked at what I played. It was not what I imagined at all. It played so well, and I didn't catch any lag at all. The character models looked great, and so did the environments, and the frame rate stayed consistent as well, even in the fighting sections. After playing around with the demo a little bit, I was very impressed. So after downloading the demo, I then bought the full game, and playing the full game on the Switch, this is very impressive. Now, of course, this looks vastly different compared to Kakarot's new next-gen version of the game that came out back in 2022. This port looks more similar to the last-gen version of the game from the PS4. While not exactly to the PS4 version for the scale that is in this game, but the fact that you could do so much in this game, like fly around and fight and whatnot, it's very impressive. And I know you're wondering how this game is in handheld mode. Well, that's a pretty easy answer there. Remember how this demo sold me while I was playing in handheld mode? Well, that pretty much should sum it up right there. In handheld mode, this game is still very impressive. I didn't expect this game to run as decent as it does on the Nintendo Switch. It's so well optimized that, again, it really shocked me at how well they managed to pull this off. Thanks to this port, I'm honestly now more confident in the other Switch ports I've turned away before. The gameplay is of course the same and is still great to play whether in handheld mode or dock. All in all, if you loved Dragon Ball Z Kakarot back when you played it when it first came out on the PS4, Xbox One, or PC, and you don't have a Steam Deck to play your PC copy on, then I definitely put this game in the try it out category for these games. This game does a really well job on the Nintendo Switch, and Bandai Namco did a really great job at optimizing this great game for the Nintendo Switch, and giving us a great way to play the anime to game adaptation of Dragon Ball Z on the go. Now with that said, it is now time for us to move on up into the ranks in the middle class area of today's Switch port recommendations, the pick it up segment if you will. Now, Today's first recommendation that we're going to have today is actually one that's pretty recent for consoles, and that game is none other than the... See, this is the problem with having no physical media. See, I don't have a box to hold! Whenever you think of racing games for the Nintendo Switch, you'd probably think of games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe or maybe Crash Team Racing. But when it comes to a third-party game that runs great and is one that's a whole lot of fun and runs really darn good on the Switch, then look no further than Asphalt Legends Unite. This game is your average type of arcade racing game brought over to console. In all reality, I gotta thank my man G-Dub for this game. He informed me of this game a while back before it came to the PS5, and he also told me about how this game was a mobile game of all things under the name Asphalt 9. Now the game has been put onto consoles, and playing this is so dang fun. Out of all the racing games I own, this one definitely stands out the most as one of, if not the best. I mean, besides NASCAR 08, nothing is topping that. But when playing the PS5 version of this game, when I found out that this had a Switch port, I had to check it out. And when booting it up, I was genuinely surprised that this game ran at a nice 60 FPS that it did. Sure, there were some graphical limitations as expected with the Nintendo Switch, but for a game like this was really awesome to be able to play this on the Switch. The racing is so much fun and is unlike most racing games on console. With most racing games on consoles, they tend to be more focused on realism and just focus on the cars on the track and maybe with some drifting in some games. Not like most kart races where you can do tricks and boosts with a bunch of power-ups and all sorts of other stuff. But in Asphalt Legends, you can do crazy things in this game. You can do like tricks in the air, do a spin move and crash into other cars and destroy them, time your boost to get a bigger boost, and so much more. This racing game screams at being an arcade racing game, and I'm all here for it. This game has a wide variety of cars to choose from as well, for you to unlock. Now, while yes, this game does have microtransactions, remember, this was originally a mobile game, keep that in mind. They aren't necessary though. You can just log in daily and get a good amount of rewards with simply just booting up the game. And also grinding in this game for the cars is a whole lot of fun. Going through the campaign and different challenges is just so entertaining for how simple this game is. So yeah, if you're up for a new kind of racing experience on the Nintendo Switch and you love some fun car gimmicks, then I'd definitely consider Asphalt Legends Unite on the Nintendo Switch. This game is a certified pick it up. And also, not to mention, this game is completely free. So please, if you can, pick it up. And also on a side note, if you can, I'd try the next gen console versions of this game as well too, just because of the really nice visuals of the game. But the Switch version is still a great experience for playing this game on the go. 2017 was a great year for the Nintendo Switch. Not only was it when this console first got started, but the Switch's first year on the market with its lineup of first and third-party games was a great start to this new console. You got games like Breath of the Wild being the Switch launch title, the first Wii U to Switch port being Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, truly a fantastic port with great new features added. There were even new Nintendo Switch focused games too to show off what this console can do, like ARMS, Snipper Clips, and 1-2 Switch. Of course, how could you forget the holiday titles for 2017 as well, being Fire Emblem Warriors, Super Mario Odyssey, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But the third-party scene of Switch games for 2017 was a great start for the console as well. A number of third-party games released years prior to the Switch got their own Nintendo Switch ports this year too, like Rayman Legends and Doom 2016. 2017 was a great comeback year for Nintendo, especially since they were coming off the Wii U, and this new console ended up turning things around for Nintendo for the better. But one of the other fantastic games to meet the Switch in 2017 was another great game franchise that sold well on Nintendo. And I'm not talking about Namco Museum. I'm talking about the one and only Sonic Mania. This was the first Sonic game to arrive on the Nintendo Switch and was meant to be the first out of 2 Sonic games meant to release in the Switch's first year on the market. And oh my, was this a good one. I remember when I first got my collector's edition back in August of 2017 at GameStop after having it pre-ordered for so long and then booting it up for the first time and being in awe of how great this game was on the Nintendo Switch. And then I'd be scratching my head with Sonic Forces months later. While the later Sonic title for 2017 would fall on its face in more ways than one, however, the Sonic title for that summer early on in the year was amazing, especially on the Nintendo Switch. This game looked great here, and it still kind of shocks me a little bit to this day. Sonic Mania was already a great looking game from the start, but unlike Sonic Superstars, this is one of those games where it doesn't even look that different compared to the other versions at all. The game runs at a pure smooth 60 frames per second on the Switch, and looks great in either docked or handheld mode. Not to mention the fun levels and content packed in this game, this truly is by far the best Sonic Nintendo Switch port out there. I mean, who doesn't have Sonic Mania on their Nintendo Switch? Go grab a sibling or a family member's Switch. There might be a copy of Sonic Mania on there that you probably didn't notice. Sure, games like Forces and Frontiers function on the Switch, but having the level of quality in the Switch port that Mania had was truly awesome, especially since Sonic's track record on the Switch afterwards was not the greatest. I know Mania has a smaller scale compared to something like Frontiers, but seeing games like Kakarot run just fine on the Switch and being comparable to the last gen version just really makes me look at Sonic games for the Switch and say, this could have been better. Like Sonic Colors Ultimate, this is the dictionary definition of a Switch port disaster. I get that this game was remade in a new engine and whatnot, but at the same time, come on guys, this game was really good on the Wii back then, so why doesn't the quote-unquote ultimate version of this game not do good on the Switch? I'd be willing to let it slide if it ran at a good 30 FPS, but it can't even manage that. But looking past the bad Sonic Switch ports that would come in later years, we could still look back at the great ones. Or in Sonic's case, I mean what would just be the one at the time. Sonic Mania on the Nintendo Switch is definitely the best Sonic Switch port we've ever received, and I definitely would say this game is a game you should definitely pick it up for the Nintendo Switch. For a fun 2D Sonic adventure, this is a great port that I would recommend to people getting into Sonic. Better than Superstars, I'll go ahead and say that. In the height of its popularity in 2017, and just a little over a month before its 1-year anniversary, Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 would end up receiving its own port to the Nintendo Switch in September of 2017. Now, there are a good number of reasons this game is so high up on here. First of all, based off of just simply looking at the other console versions of this game, you'd assume that this version would have trouble running on the Nintendo Switch entirely. But as a matter of fact, that is not the case at all here. This game runs at different frame rates depending on what you're doing. When you're in the hub world, playing story missions, parallel quests, training with masters, and watching cutscenes, the game runs at a decent 30 frames per second. It's pretty stable for the Nintendo Switch, and the scale this game has to offer, it's pretty good when you think about it. But whenever you switch over to local battles, photo mode, and online battles, the game then runs at a nice 60 frames per second. In the grand scheme of things, this is where the 60 frames per second is needed for the game. It works so well, and playing it feels so smooth like the other versions of the game. Well, yes, much like with most other Switch games we've talked about today, the Switch version does have its own things that make it obvious this is the Switch version. One of the main ones being the game has more visible pixels around the characters than in the HD versions. While at first this might be noticeable if you're coming straight off something like the PS4 version, after a while when playing matches, you really hardly notice it anymore. Another thing that makes it obvious you're playing this port is that sometimes there can be moments where the game lags during fights. Like if you do a Kamehameha next to some rocks or an environment where there is stuff around you, the game will lag noticeably when comparing to the HD version. It'll fire with no problems at all. But this doesn't really happen too often in this port, and when it does, it goes right back to normal once the attack is finished. I could see why some would criticize the port for some of these issues, but believe me, in comparison to the other bigger problems Xenoverse 2 has, these are only tame. Just the fact that this is running smooth as it does when playing local battles or online battles here on the Switch is still amazing. I mean, this port must have done something right, because if I put this many hours into this port, then it must have been a dang good one to say the least. I've loved Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 for a long time. I loved this game from the moment when I first got the Lite version back in early 2019 when I got my PS4. I played the life out of that demo as much as I could every time I came home from school, until eventually I got the full game a few months later, and had an even bigger blast with the Cell Saga and onward with the rest of the game and the rest of the sagas. As months went on, I was obsessed with this game. My summer of 2019 heavily consisted of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 and Mortal Kombat 11. But I remembered seeing a Switch port before on the store shelves when I first started getting into Dragon Ball in 2018. Now that I had this game, I had to get my hands on that Switch port. And when I first played the game on my Switch, I was surprised at how it did in comparison to games like Mortal Kombat 11 or Team Sonic Racing. At first, I wasn't a fan of the 30 FPS because I was so used to the PS4 version, but after a while, I got used to it and grew to really love the Nintendo Switch version of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. I love this port massively, and it's one of the Switch ports of games I played the most. I mean, look at those hours! This game has so much fun content packed into it with a wide variety of characters to play as, including you can create your own character of any Dragon Ball race you want to, from Saiyan to Namekian to even a Frieza race. The choice is yours at the end of the day. The fighting in this game is phenomenal, with so many great mechanics, combos, and iconic moves from the actual anime you can pull off with your own character or a character from the main cast. Not to mention your own CAC can even venture out into the game's story mode on fixing the Dragon Ball history. And then eventually with the DLC, a bunch of what-if scenarios for us to play. Overall, if you're looking for a great, fun, action-filled 3D fighting game on the Nintendo Switch, then Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 for the Nintendo Switch is what I'd recommend to you. This game is definitely a solid pick it up for the Nintendo Switch. Now, if we can only get that netcode fixed, Bandai, that would be great. Now, the past two sections we've gone over today on third-party games for the Nintendo Switch were the try it out and pick it up sections. The next one we have for today is the big one here, ladies and gentlemen. These next three games are ones that are in the ranking of what I would say that are totally worth it. These three are the Switch games that I would 110% tell you you would not regret getting once got. And the first one to start us off is actually a 2-in-1 pack for today, but one problem. I don't have these games, so I can't really talk about them. So I got my good buddy Mr. Lag to come on here and shed some light on these two Switch ports and why they are definitely worth it. So with that said, it's all you, man.
Next up on our list is Ori and the World of Wisps. This is the sequel to the critically acclaimed Ori and the Blind Forest, a platforming Metroidvania hybrid on the Xbox One. This game is the perfect example of how indie developers can push the industry forward, sometimes even more than AAA companies themselves. The graphics here are beautiful, with this ethereal, dreamlike art style that really draws you in. Platforming is tough, but is always responsive and never feels unfair. The soundtrack is incredible. Please go listen to it. And the story is just heart-wrenching, exploring a tale of loss and love for others. Trust me, it'll have you tearing up within the first 10 minutes. After the success of Blind Forest, it was eventually ported to the Nintendo Switch. Since the game is almost entirely sprite-based, this port is very stable and looks just as good as the Xbox version. And, incredibly, the same can be said for its sequel. Ori and the World of Wisps is such a technical leap from the first game in every way possible. It couldn't even run well on the Xbox One when it first launched. So the fact that the developers were able to get a game this visually demanding to run on the Switch is simply incredible. Now, unlike its predecessor, World of Wisps uses far less sprites and more 3D models for the characters and environments. These work together to create one of the best looking games of all time. But how do you go about porting that to Switch? Even more daunting is the fact that Ori is a fast game. This little guy can move, so having to render all these high quality assets while Ori is zipping through the world can be super demanding on the hardware. But against all odds, they did it. What's even more impressive is that it hits an almost constant 60 FPS, only dipping occasionally when the screen gets filled up with effects. They achieved this by having the graphics switch between high and low quality assets depending on where the player is more likely to look. At times, it even looks on par with the Xbox One version. It's really a sight to see. Graphics aside, the game itself plays identically to the original version. The platforming feels even better than the first game. Combat is heavily expanded on with a suite of new powerful weapons and shards to customize. The OST is still kicking, and the story is just as, if not more emotional than the first. Aside from some long loading screens and the occasionally blurry textures, Ori and the World of Wisps on Switch is still the beautiful, challenging, and emotional experience it's always been. This one is totally worth it.
Thanks, Lag. And like he said, you guys, these ports are totally worth it. Indeed, check them out if you can, because I guarantee you, from what I've seen, these are amazing, and you would definitely not regret getting them. Now, with that stated, let's go ahead and move on to the second last game of today.
As long as there's music, I'll keep on dancing.
Before becoming set only on Nintendo consoles with its sequel in 2014, Bayonetta was once originally released on consoles other than Nintendo back when the first game came out in 2009. Bayonetta was a great success from the start with its first title released on the PS3 and Xbox 360. With the game's amazing combat and just the character of Bayonetta as a whole, it's all so in your face and so unpredictable, and that's what made Bayonetta so cool and well loved. So a sequel to this amazing game was only imminent. And eventually when Bayonetta 2 released on the Wii U in 2014, thanks to Nintendo for picking up and publishing the product when no other company would, this game managed to get people on the train to buy a Wii U and more people into the Bayonetta franchise as a whole. This game was loved when it launched on the Wii U and was a massive step up from Bayonetta 1. While it definitely sucked for PS4 and Xbox One players at the time, at least years later when the Switch came out, Bayonetta 2 would even receive a port to there as well, so more people can even have access to this game to get ready for the next game being Bayonetta 3. But that's not all that happened when Bayonetta 2 came out on the Wii U. With Bayonetta 2, packaged alongside it was Bayonetta 1. Now players who didn't play the original game now had a chance to play on their Wii U if they didn't have an Xbox 360 or a PS3. Having this available alongside Bayonetta 2 was a great choice from the devs. They managed to port a next-gen game at the time to the Wii U. This was perfect because when Bayonetta eventually came to Smash Bros., you had both of her games available to play on the Wii U. Not to mention, this was a great way for players who haven't played a Bayonetta game before could get a chance to play this new Bayonetta game on the Wii U alongside the original game where it all started. But what does this have to do with anything, you may be asking? Well, when Bayonetta 2 got its Nintendo Switch port, Bayonetta 1 also got a Nintendo Switch port as well. And how does this game do on the Nintendo Switch considering this game was once an Xbox 360 gem? Well, to say the least, this game is amazing on the Nintendo Switch. This game is how a port should be done. This game is exactly 1-to-1 fun on how it was on the 360, if not better. This Switch port of Bayonetta runs genuinely perfect and flawless on the Nintendo Switch. There is no lag whatsoever here and no slowdown, nothing downgraded visually or nothing at all looks inferior to the previous console version at all whatsoever. The game is great to play on here, and honestly, I don't even know if I'll have a reason to pick up my copy on the 360 ever again. This port is one I was definitely impressed with. Now, to be fair, Nintendo probably took the original game and optimized it to run for Nintendo consoles, since the Bayonetta games are now only coming out on Nintendo consoles. But still, this was originally a game released on the PS3 and Xbox 360, and now it's running smooth as butter on the Nintendo Switch. It was almost like it was made for this console. This game is definitely worth it for the Nintendo Switch. If you guys love fun combat in games, then I would definitely pick up the Bayonetta trilogy on the Nintendo Switch. Now it is time to move on to the last game for today, and this game is one that I think is 110, you know what, screw that, I think it is 125% worth it. And this game is a game that I could definitely say I've played one of the most of all time on the Switch. In January 2018, the newest Dragon Ball game would be released, and this game was the Dragon Ball game that would be one of the best games that Bandai Namco had ever released for the franchise. That game was none other than Dragon Ball FighterZ. And in September of 2018, the game would receive a port to the Nintendo Switch, and oh my wow, this port is amazing. First of all, look at this game. This game's art style is absolutely stunning, and it looks so dang good whether you're playing on the PS4 or the Nintendo Switch. The anime-style graphics really just complement the game well, and everything you can do in this game as well. Sure, it's not like the Last of Us remake graphics, but this game's graphics are stunning for the art style that it has, and I love it. To talk about how the game runs, it runs at a nice, smooth 60 frames per second in either docked or handheld mode. Frame drops are non-existent, and this is very impressive in a game where you are doing a lot of this.
You're pretty careful. Try this. Super You're as good as space dust! It's ready! Okay, that's all it took. This is everything I've got!
This is still the Switch version, right? This game is smooth as butter here on the Nintendo Switch and has hardly been downgraded visually at all. The only thing that's downgraded is when in handheld mode, the characters have more of a thicker line around them. But other than that, nothing has been changed much visually, unlike other games that we've mentioned today. The 2D fighting in this is truly amazing and absolutely flawless. Everything from the command inputs not being too crazy like Street Fighter, for example. As much as I like Street Fighter, the command inputs in those games, it would sometimes get a little confusing for my liking. But here in Dragon Ball FighterZ, the command inputs are simple and can be complex, but memorable enough to mesh in with your combos well to the point where even if you haven't played the game in a minute, it could still be muscle memory. The fighting is also fast and fluent, leading for you to be able to pull off devastating combos during matches, whether you're playing locally with friends on the couch or online with some of the best of the best. Not to mention, much like other Dragon Ball games, you've got a massive wide variety of characters to choose from to main in your own personal team, or you can just be like me and just have the Goku squad only. The characters are all so easy to pick up but tough to master, kind of like Smash Bros. In a way, where anyone can play, but to get good, you have to master that character. And Dragon Ball FighterZ definitely brings that to the table here. And playing this on the Switch is a whole lot of fun. One thing that always amazed me about this port is that while playing this epic fighting game, you really can just forget that you're playing this on the Switch sometimes. That's what I love about this and the other great ports mentioned today. If I don't have to compare the game to the main console counterpart often, then it truly succeeds. And Dragon Ball FighterZ does it perfectly. Out of all the Switch games mentioned today, this one is one where I would say if you like fighting games and you want a good one to play on your Switch, Dragon Ball FighterZ is definitely that game to play. This game has so much you can do in it, from dramatic finishes to epic combos and character variety teams, online play, local play, and much more. Dragon Ball FighterZ is definitely the game I'd say is totally worth picking up for the Nintendo Switch. If you don't have it, please give it a try. I truly do love this game, I really do. There is hardly anything wrong with it at all, and I really do recommend you guys pick up this game as well for the Nintendo Switch. And if you don't have a Switch, I highly recommend you pick it up on the other consoles out there right now, or on PC, whichever you prefer. I really recommend this game to you guys. It is fantastic. I'd definitely give it a try if you can. Oh, but one thing I feel like I should warn you about, just don't even bother with the story mode, please. I'm saving you hours of your life, alright? Trust me on this. The Nintendo Switch is by far one of the most iconic video game consoles of all time, and it's now been on the market for 7 years, and still going strong to this very day. This console has definitely left a big impact on gaming like no other. The fact that we have the ability to play this console either on the couch, or switch it to be on the go, is still awesome. While we may clown on the Switch for its underpowered hardware, or its well-known bad ports of third-party games, at the same time, you gotta give it to this thing right here. Through all the bad ports this console has, there are some great gems on this console when it comes to third-party lineup of games, and Nintendo's main in-house games too. There can be some fantastic games to play on here, even if you don't want the third-party games. But even though sometimes some third-party games end up bad on here, it's still impressive that it can run on the Nintendo Switch at all. At least we got the port. Better than having nothing, right? Now, do I prefer playing the Switch versions of games like Mortal Kombat 11 or Sonic Frontiers? No, not really. But are they still somewhat acceptable at the end of the day? Yes, but these 9 games we went over today are 9 out of probably many other great third-party gems available here on the Switch. And again, I definitely recommend you all go and try each of these games out if you can, because these ports are truly fantastic and definitely some of the great third-party ports that you can get on the Nintendo Switch. I truly do love the Nintendo Switch. Even though it has the reputation it has for the third-party lineup of games it has on here, I still love this thing for what it's managed to accomplish in the years it's been on the market. Even though we might be upon the Switch's end in the recent years, I'll still look back at this and say, hey, Nintendo did a great job with this console. Even though there are some games from this era that we wish we could forget.